Welcome back to another episode of the Engineer's Corner. You're now rocking with the best, your boy Docs Forever, and this is the Engineer's Corner. Today we're going to talk about analog versus digital. Does it make a difference? Is it necessary? Do we need it? Let's talk about it. Engineer's Corner, Docs Forever. Welcome back.
Self-made, I've been paid. My guns good, they well raised. My bitch bad as hell. Haters, man.
When I first started doing the engineering thing, one of the things that I really didn't care about, wasn't really concerned about, was analog gear. I had Pro Tools running. I could record. I had a mic. Well, mic is analog, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I had a mic. Everything was good, So I used everything digital. Digital in terms of recording, in terms of mixing, in terms of getting my levels right. Everything was digital. Now, later on, when I started, getting more into my audio gear and things of that sort, I started adding some analog. And let's go back a little bit, because before that, I had an M-Box. And when I spoke to the people at Avid advised me that my M-Box came with a preamp already inside of the hardware. So they said, you really don't need a preamp. Just get the M-Box and you'll be fine. You don't need no preamp. So I said, okay, great. That's less money for me to spend. But I started comparing my music to music on the radio, or just other friends' music that was doing mixes who had a little bit more gear, a little bit more experience than I did. And it was a difference. It was a difference in vocal tone. It was a difference in just how the vocal set was sitting inside the mix. And I didn't really know what it was at first. And this is the outcome of my process and thoughts in terms of analog and digital. Now, when it comes to vocals and having vocals being imported or recorded into the DAW, if you want your sound to be extremely professional, I would say you would want a piece of analog gear to be in between your mic and your computer. You want your mic and your vocals to be touched by some analog gear, whether that's a preamp, whether that's a compressor. And please believe, before I had the preamp or compressor, I had nothing, and I made good records. It wasn't like a necessity. You still can make some great music without those pieces of hardware, but to step your game up, or to have your sound be a little bigger and a little bit more upfront, or just stand out a little bit more against the competitors, or against the competitors, the competition, your other engineer friends and shit. You know what I mean? You want to have at least a preamp. And we're not talking about an expensive piece of hardware. We're talking about just get your hands on any type of preamp that you can make adjustments to the levels, get everything right, and so your mic doesn't have to work as hard. You turn the levels up on the preamp, get your vocal level sitting right. And sometimes a lot of preamps have different adjustments in terms of how you can manipulate the vocal in terms of input and output. So for all my engineer heads, if you're coming up into the engineer game and you're trying to build your own studio, at first, if you can't afford it, that's cool. Do what you got to do with the digital stuff. Get everything right. Get it. Use your compressors in the DAW as much as you can. But eventually, if you want to step up your production value, invest in a piece of hardware in terms of preamp or compressor. The preamp that I'm using is the Avalon. What is this? The 737 VT. It took me some time to get that, but it was a great investment. And then I also bought another compressor after doing some research about my compressors and things, how I wanted my vocals to sound. Now, other things that people use hardware for, I don't think is a necessity. I might, a lot of engineers might be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. But I don't, I feel like there's so many different plugins inside the DAW that emulate the analog sound and the characteristics of analog gear. It's really a slight difference now, in terms of compression and EQ and reverb. we live in a day and age where your studio can be, pretty small and have a big sound, and that's because a lot of analog manufacturers are realizing they can make a little bit more money if they find out how to create an emulation of their hardware gear and be able to mass produce it and give it to the consumer a lot quicker than building these expensive pieces of hardware that a lot of people aren't buying, So with that being said, in terms of pre-production, or I would say after you have your vocal nicely, crisp and the right volume imported into your session, I don't think it's a necessity to have hardware gear to compress and things of that sort. I'm not saying it doesn't make your music better. It's probably a nice sound, but I can't. Using the term better is hard for me. Now, in terms of input and recording into the DAW, I would say using a compressor, a preamp, or a lot of compressors nowadays are combined with a little bit of EQ is good to get something to have your vocals sit a certain way inside the DAW coming into it. But like I said, after it's recorded into the DAW, I wouldn't, if you're starting out on a budget, I wouldn't say, worry about, adding this compressor and adding all this outboard gear. Get a couple plugins that you like, start slow. A lot of plugins that I use are UAD. UAD that's Universal Audio. They have great emulations of their plugins, and you have to have the hardware, the Apollo. You have to have Apollo to use UAD plugins or any type of UAD hardware. Waves has great emulations of plugins, so invest in some of these plugins to get your sound to a good level too. And that's my opinion on analog and digital. When it comes to recording into the DAW, I would say get you a piece of analog gear, get you a compressor, get you a preamp. Don't think that your interface is going to do all the work. It's able to, but if you want to compete, invest a couple $100s into a preamp or a compressor. That's what I'm thinking. All right, guys, thank you for watching. I go by the name of Docs Forever, one of the best in Brooklyn, New York. You know what I mean? We at Move Media Studios, and we're going to check y'all out next week. All right? Deuces.
In the Benz coupe with the fucking roof gone. Fuck as you want, I just been in my zone. Bitches sit in my phone, but I never be home. And then not on the road, getting dollars to blow. Should have my own reality show. I'm the hottest, going out of control on the ground for the dough. Moolah, got the